March 1996, I was 16 and joined the British Army. When you join the armed forces in the UK, you started. It's different now, with 10 weeks in basic training. As I was going to be an Army chef, I attended Pigeon training camp for what I thought would be the worst part of Army training. I couldn't be more wrong. Now back then I was super fit and very happy-go-lucky. I took to the training even though it was incredibly tough, with horrible accommodation, bad food, and running ragged from 4 AM until 9 PM every single day. But I got through and passed. I still remember my passing out parade and how proud my mom was watching me in my uniform marching around. After you finish the hell of boot camp, you go on to phase 2, which is your trade training, which, depending on what you chose, would decide where you went. For me, as a chef, was St. Omar Barracks in Aldershot. However, until your phase 2 training started, everybody, no matter the trade, went to Deepcut Barracks, a delightful camp about 1 mile from Pigeon, so only down the road. Initially, I was very excited to be leaving basic training. After all, the food was better, you could have duvets on your bed, and the regime was nowhere near as strict as Pigeon. When you first arrive, you were all put into a new arrivals building, sharing a room with 10 others until they decide what platoon you go to. I assume based on the length of time you'll be there, so I settled in for my first night. I knew a few of my roommates from my training platoon. My very first night at camp, I got a glimpse into the realities of what Deepcut was. I woke up around 1 AM and needed the bathroom. Upon getting to the door, before I could open it, 2 guys in gas masks carrying pillowcases barged into the room. They ran straight to the far bed and proceeded to batter the lad sleeping in the bed with what looked from the outline like helmets in the pillowcase. After watching this stunned, I thought I should get help, and it was then I noticed the corporal, who was in charge of us that night, was holding the door open for the 2 guys. He looked hammered and was in hysterics at what was unfolding. The assault lasted for probably 30 seconds before they ran out, followed by the corporal at the door, and I could hear them pissing themselves with laughter as they ran down the stairs. After helping the battered lad to the bathrooms, I watched him clean himself up. Neither of us said anything. After all, he looked about my age, 16. What could we do if one of the people in charge was involved and basically behind this? In the next few days, I came to realize this camp was basically where sergeants, corporals, and officers went if they had failed in their careers or for punishment. What better people to look after 200 to 300 young impressionable soldiers, all between the ages of 16 and their very early 20s. They got drunk and did things to us for their own amusement. I had the hope and knowledge it would be okay. You'd normally spend 1 or at most 2 weeks here. I would be out of here soon. On day 3, I got called into the sergeant's office. He explained that due to the fact they are so short on Army chefs, nobody wanted to be a heroic Army chef, so they were critically short. I had to wait at Deepcut for enough chefs to pass basic training before going on to my next phase. After asking how long, 3 months was the reply. 3 months of this hellhole. I thought it couldn't get any worse. I was very, very wrong. At this stage, I got introduced to my platoon while I was at Deepcut. My brand new platoon sergeant, I will refer to him as Sergeant G, initially sounded very friendly and spoke with a soft Sunderland accent. He started by laying down ground rules, cleaning, etc. It was at this point he warned us about his evil twin. We all laughed, but he wasn't joking. He said if we came across his twin, it wouldn't end well, and left us at that. After speaking to a few of the lads that had been there a week or so, they reiterated the warning along with, "Do not get on Sergeant G's radar. Just keep your head down." It was at this point I began hearing rumors of the things that happened and the involvement of Sergeant G. Apparently, he had made this soldier the target of his evil twin and made his life an utter misery, tormenting him whenever he could. It was a few days after that I personally witnessed the evil twin in action. I and a few lads were in our room when a pigeon flew in through the open window. After several hilarious attempts to shoot the bird out, we failed and the pigeon carried on flying around and landing on lockers. That was when Sergeant G entered the room and asked what was going on. After explaining about the pigeon, "I will show you how to catch him," he says, then proceeded to jump from the beds into the air in an attempt to catch the bird. At first this was hilarious, we were all laughing, even Sergeant G, until it went on for at least 30 minutes, maybe more. He just didn't stop. He was relentless. The poor pigeon, probably scared to death at this point, got himself caught by Sergeant. Now what happened next, you may think is bullshit, but I can 100% swear to this and will always remember this moment. Sergeant G put the pigeon's head in his mouth and bit it clean off. He then spat the head out onto the beds and threw the body out of the window. Stunned by this, we just stood there while the demented sergeant kept saying, "Evil Ed's had his dinner," and laughing. While this is probably the most psychotic event I have ever witnessed, the sheer cruelty of Sergeant G was legendary. One day in the height of summer, he made us push a huge temporary road around a field barehanded. If you have never seen one of those, it's basically a gigantic roll of rubber and steel. Being jet black and being in the sun all day, this thing was incredibly hot. So hot in fact that all of our palms and fingers turned into one huge blister on each hand. After inspecting the damage to our ravaged hands, he shouted at us for not having men's hands, even to the women. Not satisfied with this, he ordered us to grab a huge rope from the back of a Land Rover and ordered us to have a tug of war with this rough strip of rope until the blisters all tore off our hands. The pain of the raw flesh of our hands was incredible, especially when he then ordered us to do press-ups on the hot concrete afterwards. There was also the time the booster injection they give everyone became infected in a few of us. Sergeant G's evil twin made it his mission to find out who had an infected booster site and would punish them in the site as hard as he could. To this day, I still carry the scar after he exploded my infected injection and then, of course, made me do press-ups after, while blood and pus poured down my arm. He would do things like hide under beds like a real-life boogeyman, waiting to see if anyone would dare talk about him, or he would hide in unlocked or empty lockers and do the same. The man was a lunatic for sure. While at Deepcut, time went slowly. It was boring. All we had to do was whatever the delightful training staff could dream up for us. One day, the lieutenant in charge announced we were going on exercise for 2 nights and 3 days in the woods, around Sandhurst. On the morning of the exercise, Sergeant G gathered everyone on parade to get everyone organized and announced that during the exercise, some of his SAS mates might make an appearance and interrogate people. I didn't think much of this, as he was always giving us veiled threats. The exercise didn't actually start off that badly. The weather during the first day was gorgeous and very sunny. And for some reason, they didn't take this as an opportunity to make us do some running in the sun. That night, we settled into guard duty. To explain, you and your basha mate. A basha is a hole dug in the ground you sleep in. We'll take a stag duty, which lasts for about an hour. The guard duty itself involves you lying down in a camouflage hole dug, especially for the guard duty, and then one of you will go into the next basha and tell them it's their turn, and so on. At the end of our turn, I went to the next basha and whispered it's their turn to stag on. A low voice with what sounded like a Scottish accent came from the shelter aggressively telling me to go away. I didn't recognize the voice and thought to myself, maybe the SAS thing is true. Maybe I can be a hero and capture Sergeant G's mates. Imagining what Sergeant G's face would be in the morning when I reported that I single-handedly repelled the SAS attack. I cocked my SA-880 with a blank round and demanded whoever it was show themselves. Silence. Angrily, I pulled back the poncho covering the basha to be greeted with what I could just see in the dark as Sergeant G's naked body. He was in the basha shagging one of the female recruits and must have put on a weird fake voice to throw me off. I stood stunned as a furious naked Sergeant G leapt to his feet, telling me not to say a word and to get back on guard duty. I couldn't quite see how angry he was because it was dark, but I could hear the fury in his voice. I now was on his radar. He was married. I now was a witness to him messing with some woman while on exercise, and I knew he would have to do something about this. The next morning, things seemed to go okay. Sergeant didn't even acknowledge me, which suited me down to the ground, and the exercise carried on until the night. The weather this night wasn't like the night before. It was torrential, and I was assigned the 3rd stag duty, which was round 1, I seem to recall. Now weirdly, I was told I had to stay on with the girl who Sergeant G was shagging, which was odd, as it meant my basha mate didn't have to do guard duty. Not sure why, but I wasn't suspicious about this sudden change. We carried on with the guard duty, chatting in low voices, bored out of our minds as the rain hammered the waterproof material above. All of a sudden, I felt a tremendous weight crash through our canopy right onto my back. Someone from behind grabbed the front of my helmet, and I could feel what seemed to be a knife against my throat. Pulling my helmet tighter backwards, it felt like someone headbutting or hitting the back of my helmet with something. He demanded I drop my rifle in the same Scottish accent I heard the night before. Pulling me to my feet, he ushered me forward into the dark forest. Glancing down, I caught a glimpse of the girl I was on guard duty with and could see how terrified she was when we locked eyes for a moment. Then she carried on lying down with her hands behind her helmet. I remember stumbling through the woods for probably 10 minutes in the pitch black when the voice ordered me to lie face down on the ground. Dropping down into what was a huge muddy puddle, I tried to keep my head up, face away from inches of foul muddy water. The voice then demanded my name, rank, and number, which I gave him. He replied he didn't believe me, and he would shove my head into the puddle with what I assumed was his foot. Daring to look up slightly, I could see 2 pairs of boots, so I knew it must be Sergeant G and probably one of the corporals. The other one didn't speak at all. They then started asking about how many people were in our platoon and who was in charge, etc., to which I obviously gave them all they wanted to know. Being 16 and terrified of being alone in the woods with what I knew was Sergeant G, I didn't want to make him angry. This, of course, had the opposite effect. He gave me what felt like a punt right to the testicles as hard as he could. The pain from this was excruciating. I felt like I wanted to throw up. Every instinct was to curl up into the fetal position, but they wouldn't allow me to. This carried on for a further 20 to 25 minutes with them asking things, like how great Sergeant G was or which corporals in the platoon were the biggest slags in the platoon. No matter what answer, met with violence like kicks to the ribs, my fingers being trod on, and at one point what felt like a thin stick whipping the back of my thighs. Thankfully, they got bored or realized they couldn't carry on doing this without doing some serious damage. I was ordered to my feet and led back to the area our platoon was camped out and told to go ahead alone when fairly close. After retrieving my rifle from the girl who was still on stag duty alone, she asked what happened. I always remember this, as I didn't want to seem like a coward. I told her nothing had happened. He just asked me questions. However, I was crying inside. All I wanted to do was go home to my mom. Pathetic as that sounds, but I felt violated. The next morning was the end of the exercise. Sergeant G gathered everyone, and after some debriefing, mainly about how bad we had done, he then announced that his mates from the SAS reported that they had interrogated a few people while staring at me the whole time. The whole march back, all I could think of was how he was going to get me. Now, everyone knew what he was like, and without a doubt, I would be targeted by him. Now the misery was unbearable. I wanted the march to last longer because at least everyone was present. He couldn't single me out. We got back to camp and everyone said about cleaning gear when I was told the officer wanted to see me. My heart leapt, thinking maybe the girl had reported what had happened. Would this be my savior? And in a way it was. The officer informed me that there were enough people to form a training troop at St. Omer, passing out from Herebright, so I would be leaving at the end of this week. Thankfully, I managed to avoid Sergeant G for the whole week. I volunteered to set up the field for RLC Day and was under the supervision of a different sergeant. So that's it, my epic tale of Deepcut Barracks. As mentioned at the start, I tried to let the tribunal know of what occurred. They didn't want to know. This man affected me in such a way that I still have recurring nightmares that I've rejoined the army and he's going to get his revenge. And as for Sergeant G, don't worry about him, boys and girls. He got his just desert for all the years of torment he doled out to vulnerable young soldiers. The army recognized this and promoted him. He is now the officer in charge of recruit welfare in the British Army. I wish this was a lie, but unfortunately it's not.